Hello everyone, today I am going to discuss a new topic, throw keyword. In the previous lecture, we had discussed about the different possible combination of try, catch and finally block. We also discussed about what is the difference between final, finally and finally block, finalize method, sorry. So in this lecture, we mainly concentrate on throw keyword. So let's take a simple example. I hope everybody familiar with cricket, okay, and you already know fielder, wicket keeper. So whenever a fielder in cricket, whenever a fielder throw a ball to wicket keeper is going to catch this ball, right? Suppose wicket keeper is Dhoni and the fielder is Virat, okay. So when the fielder throwing a ball, wicket keeper is going to catch this ball, okay. Now if I compare this concept with our in Java programming, so who is going to throw a, but whose person is going to throw a ball? Virat Kohli, right? So if I think this is a programmer, and who is going to catch this ball? Wicket keeper. So if I compare with this Java program, we can think as a JVM, okay. So programmer is going to throw a ball or something else. So it's not a ball. If I compare, it's a exception. So whenever a programmer throwing an exception to JVM is going to catch this exception, right? So sometimes the programmer create your own exception object and hand over to JVM. For that which to create an exception by the programmer, we use the throw keyword, right? We use the throw keyword, or you can say throw statement, clause, whatever it is. So this concept is very compulsory, right? So throw is a keyword, or you can say clause, or you can say statement, whatever it is. So sometimes we can create exception object. We means we are the programmer. The programmer create a exception object explicitly and hand over to the JVM manually. For this we have to use this throw keyword. I am telling that about explicitly means those exception is created by the programmer, or you can say user defined exception, okay, right? So how can I throw an exception? By using throw keyword. So we can write throw new, the name of the exception. What is the, for example, arithmetic exception, okay, arithmetic exception. And if I want to pass some description about this exception, we can pass as a string. For example, we have seen by 0. So that string pass as an argument, okay. Here throw is a keyword, and we know that how to create an object. We are creating object by using new keyword, and this is the exception class, arithmetic exception. Actually creation of, it means creation of exception object arithmetic exception, creation of exception object, for example arithmetic exception explicitly, right? And this is this is the keyword which is used to hand over created exception, created exception to the JVM manually. So right, so throw is a keyword. So where we can use when we can use this keyword? Sometimes if I create an exception object explicitly and hand over to the JVM manually, for this type or for this we have to use the throw keyword, right. So let us take a simple example so that we can understood how can I throw an exception. Okay. So suppose I am taking a simple class here, the name of the class is test, okay, and public static void main string args. So within this method I am just going to print system.out.println 10/0. We can write any number which is divided by 0. So definitely here the exception will be arise, yes or no. Of course we have seen so many times that the exception will be arise because it is going to divide a number divided by 10. Okay. Similarly, if I want to create my own exception, class test, I am taking the same example so that you can get it more clear from this example. So public static void main string args, within that I have to write new, okay. Before new we have to write throw. So throw new arithmetic exception. For example, we can throw any exception, no problem, arithmetic exception. Then this is the object, I have to pass the argument, for example by 0, we have seen right now. This is the description. Now it is clear, okay. And we have closed this public static void main, then I have to close this class. Now tell me what is the difference between these two. So we know that in this class 1, this is class 1, for example this is class 2. In class test 1, in example in the left hand side, so definitely we will create an exception, right. So it will create an exception, but whenever we are just want to use this code, so immediately I will get a compilation error, you will get an exception like exception in thread main, arithmetic exception followed by description of the exception is by 0 at which location, main, and main is under test class. So I will see main. Even if I use the if I use the pin track trace method, we have already seen that toString method, get method will get this particular exception. Here who is going to handle this exception? We know default handling exception handler, okay, default exception handler. But here we are just also throwing an exception by using throw keyword. But here this exception is happening internally, but here we are throwing this exception manually. Here also when the exception is arise is automatically hand over to JVM but it internally, but here we are just creating an exception and throwing this exception to JVM by manually. That is the difference between the first example and second example. Here the exception is created, we will get the same exception message in our computer screen, but the difference is here we are just using manual exception or creating manual exception, and here we are just internally exception is handled by Java or default handler, exception handler. Okay. Now the next question is, I hope this example is clear to you, and next question is why we need throw exception, why need throw exception? Because in our definition we already discussed that an exception is a unexpected, unwanted event that disturb the normal flow of execution, right? So here this is unexpected event, unwanted event, but here why should I go for this explicitly creating our own exception? That is the question, right? It may be. Okay. So for example, in my account I have a 20,000. Okay. In my bank account I have a 20,000 amount, and I have a ATM card. I went to ATM card and I already know that I have a 20,000 amount is remaining balance as a balance. Suppose sometimes what may happen that we are trying to withdraw by intentionally trying to withdraw 30,000, right? So what will happen? We are thinking that if it is working fine, then I will get 30,000 and I will make a treat today for my friend, right? It may be happen, but it is not happen in practically, because we have to create a, for example, I am writing this in the form of programming code or algorithm code so that you can understand. So for example, this my account is withdraw. I have written a function, suppose some amount I am going to pass, and now I am checking if the balance is, or you can say amount is greater than balance, so withdraw amount actually, then I want to throw a new exception, right? New, suppose the name of the exception is insufficient balance, something insufficient fund exception, right? Let me complete this method. Okay. So in this case, if I want to withdraw more than amount available balance, then what will happen? We have to explicitly, we have to throw an exception that much amount is not available in your account. Why? Because we cannot say from this program, we cannot say the compiler is not going to check that how much money in your balance and how much money you are going to withdraw. So in this case, in this type of scenario, we have to explicitly throw an exception to the customer. So programmer is going to create that type of exception where we use our throw keyword. Maybe take another example. In earlier days we have seen that when we are using the mobile phone, by scratching some PIN number or some integer number, it may be a 15 digit or 20 digit, 16 digit or 20 digit. By mistake, if I mistake one of the last digit, the recharge is not possible, because, but we already know that the last digit, for example, for first 19 digit is okay, but the last digit is 1. We already, if I type 1, so the coupon code will be valid and it will recharge your mobile phone, but intentionally we are just checking that whether if I give the last digit as 2 or 5 or 7, any number, is the recharge is possible or not. is going to happen or not. We intentionally do it one or more times in our life also. We have used it. So, in that case, when there is another number, explicitly we have to throw an exception to the user. Otherwise, this is not going to happen happily, right? So, this type of example where the programmer explicitly need to create their own exception, right? So, in that case we can use the throw keyword. Now, consider some case or fact about this throw keyword. Let us consider case 1. Case 1, now I think it is visible to you. Case 1, suppose I am taking the simple example. So, same example, I have created exception, I want to create exception. The reference variable, for example, static. So, for example, arithmetic exception, I am writing in short, okay, arithmetic exception equal to new arithmetic exception. A stands for arithmetic exception, right, new arithmetic exception. And after that I have used public static void main and string args and I am just throw, that is the object exception object. We have created exception, arithmetic exception equal to new arithmetic exception, and this reference variable is static because I want to directly access this variable in public static void main. We already know that, right, because we cannot access a non-static variable or method within a static method, right, directly we cannot access. So, if I want to directly create this, access this variable or method, we have to declare the static. So, directly static variable we can access within a static method. So, that is why I have just write here E. So, that is accessible. Now, I am taking the same example, class test, consider this one also, class test. I have created a reference variable AE, arithmetic exception E, for example, and then I am writing the same code, public static void main, and within string args I am writing the same code. But let me tell you, there is some difference between this code. Both code are same. Here we have just create an object of arithmetic class. Here I have just assign a instance variable of arithmetic exception. But what is the difference between two methods? Let us see. In this case, I will throw an arithmetic exception. So, runtime I will get arithmetic exception, right? Runtime I will get arithmetic exception. But in this case, when we are going to throw an exception E, throw E is a what? It is a reference variable, instance variable, right? It is not create an actual exception. So, it is a reference variable, or we can object reference variable which is referring null. So, I will get at runtime I will get null pointer exception. Why? Because refer to a null, this E, this exception object, or you can say E is not an object, is not pointing to any exception object. So, that is why is pointing null. So, I will get null pointer exception, right. So, that is the case 1. In case 1 we have seen that when we are throwing a exception object. So, from this case 1 we can conclude that whenever we are going to throw, that throw keyword must throw a throwable object. For example, ball is throwable, bus is not throwable, hill is not throwable, but ball is throwable. So I will throw that kind of object which is throwable. So here there is this object is not throwable because it's referring null. So that's why I am getting null pointer exception, right? In case 2, let's move on case 2. In case 2, I am taking a simple example, same example, just explaining 1-2 lines so that you can get the clear idea. So I am just not writing everything. I am public static void, for example, main. Within main, we have a system.out.println. I am just want to divide a number 10 by 0, and after that I want to print system.out.println hello, right? And here I am doing the same thing, class test. Within class test, public static void main. Within the main method, I am throwing by throw keyword, throw new exception, arithmetic exception. Arithmetic exception I am writing in short arithmetic exception by using passing some argument, for example by 0. We have already seen in the earlier example. So I am not writing in details. Same thing, I want to print system.out.println hello. Now tell me what is the difference between these two. In this case, I am just in this case the compilation will be done yes or no. In this case the compilation will be done yes or no. So here what kind of exception it is? What kind of exception? It's a what kind of exception? Arithmetic exception, right? So it may be arise or may not be arise, right? So it's a arithmetic exception is belongs to which class? Runtime exception, right? Runtime exception is check exception or uncheck exception? Uncheck exception. So uncheck exception, so it may be uncheck exception is check at compile time, yes or no? No. Runtime check exception is not check at compile time. In runtime, it will may arise and it will get an error exception, right? It will show in our computer screen. So in runtime exception, I will going to get a exception error, runtime error actually. So what is exception? Arithmetic exception. We know the name of the exception, arithmetic exception, java.lang.arithmetic exception, and give the description by 0 at location main, okay, as test.main. You know that at test.main, right? Here what will happen if I write a throw keyword? So compiler already know that if I want to throw a exception, right? If I want to throw an exception, compiler already know that I am going to explicitly throw an exception, arithmetic exception, right? So after that, why we write the system.out.println? So this is the unreachable statement. So compiler will report. So compilation, I will get a compilation error, not runtime error. So I will get a compilation error because compiler is not going to compile this code, because this syntax is compiler is always checking the syntax. So here this statement is always unreachable. So why the compiler is going to compile this code? So it's a unreachable code. So compiler will give the unreachable exception, right? Unreachable exception, showing this message, or we can say unreachable statement. So after throw we cannot, from this case 2 we can say that after throw we cannot write any statement directly. We may do it indirectly. Suppose if I use if the balance is greater than something, throw new exception, else something, some message, it may be happened. Indirectly we can write after the throw keyword, but directly never ever we are going to write any statement after the throw keyword, right. So always try to keep in mind, as I mentioned earlier, that throw exception will be the last statement in any function, right. So this is all about case 2. Now suppose I am taking case 3, I am considering case 3, I am taking the same example, class test, name of the class is test. Within this class test I am just public static void main string args within that I just want to throw a exception, right. So I am just writing throw a new exception. So here the exception is, for example, test without argument. Okay. Now I have completed the public static void main, I have also completed test. Now tell me, what is the problem here? Is there any problem? In case 3, class test, okay, no problem. I am throwing new exception. Here the exception class is test class, right. Here the exception class is test class, but is it not acceptable or not? No, it is not acceptable. Why? Because whenever we are going to throw an exception, is exception object, the exception object must be throwable, right. Here the test is a normal Java class, So normal Java is not belongs to exception class. So we know the hierarchy of exception. So this must be any of the exception class. Later we will discuss it must be runtime exception, so that we can get the clear idea about this exception. So right now we cannot simply throw this exception, because it is not an exception class, it is a simple Java object. So we cannot exception. So compiler, I will get a compile time error. If I write this code or if I want to compile, so I will get compile time error. So the message is incompatible types found test. This is the name, and require java dot lang dot throwable. So it means that I have to declare some throwable object. So which is throwable? So that means we have to give some exception which is throwable. We cannot use throw keyword with this test. Now let me modify this code. Suppose this class is not an exception class, right? We already know that this class is a user defined class, is not belongs to predefined exception class. Now if I take a simple change, modify this code, the class test extends runtime exception. So that means this test is a subclass, yes, right, and which subclass of runtime exception. You can take any exception, no problem, but for this is for example. So is this test class extends the runtime exception, right. So this class is a subclass of exception class. Now it belongs to exception class. Now I will not got a compile time error, because when at throw new test is a exception class. So that's why it will not show a compile time error, but it will show what kind of error? Runtime error. Now it is okay, the code is okay, compilation will be done, compilation will be clear. During compilation there is no error, but runtime exception in main thread at test.main. Why? Because this exception is arise and it cannot handle anywhere, because I have this class is belongs to runtime exception. So runtime exception is uncheck exception. So this is not handled anywhere. So it will show an exception which is runtime, but not compile time. So we can use the throw keyword only for throwable type. If you trying to use the normal Java object, we will get a compile time error saying incompatible types. So in this lecture I have discussed what is throw keyword or throw clause or throw statement. We can say that whenever sometimes we are going to, our programmer is going to explicitly throw an object or throw an exception object, then we use throw keyword. Then we have discussed about 1, 2, 3 cases where we can get the clear idea about when we use the throw keyword and when we are throwing some exception, the what would be the exception. And even we have seen that if I want to use the throw keyword as the last statement, otherwise after that if there any statement hint, then the compiler will give an error unreachable statement, right. In next lecture I am going to discuss about the throws keyword. Here we know throw and we will add s extra to this throw keyword, but please don't understand that don't think that there is a only difference in small s. There is a big difference. Throw and throws keyword I will discuss in the next lecture. I will also discuss about the customize exception, how to create our own customized exception. In next lecture I will discuss about that. Thank you.